Welcome back to the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Karnes. This week on the podcast, I interview my friend, David Cobb. David is a college football and college basketball writer for CBS Sports and Paramount. He's become a good friend of mine over the last 4 years. We've met through Chick-fil-A, and we have a great conversation about, great bosses and what it takes to be a great boss across all industries, especially working with people who have individual projects and need a lot of freedom to shine in their role. We talk about good bosses in that area, as well as genuine human connection across all industries, and especially in his industry of journalism. And we talk about AI and writing. Really great conversation with my good friend David. Really fruitful, really valuable. I really hope you enjoy the interview. I wrote a book called Master Your First Job: The Remarkable Path from First Day to First Promotion. This is the book that every young employee needs and every employer wishes that they had. If you'd like a free copy of my book, Master Your First Job, you can go to masteryourfirstjob.com/free. That's masteryourfirstjob.com/free. You can get a free e-copy of Master Your First Job, and I'll send it to your email inbox. Let's dive into my great conversation with my friend Cobb. David, thank you so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast. We've done podcast interviews before, but not on this podcast. That'll be the other one, which we'll have to have you back on here soon. But thanks so much for being on this podcast. Share a little bit about you and your story.
Yeah, first off, just thanks for having me. I'm super proud of everything that you're doing with Waves Business Coaching and being a published author now. So it's an honor to be invited on, and just wishing nothing but the best for you and your family moving forward. My name is David Cobb, and I am a college sports writer with CBS Sports, a role that I've held now for about 5.5 years. I feel very fortunate to be at a legacy media company doing something that I love to do. And I try not to ever take that for granted. Because like anything, there are moments and times when it feels like a job. Every job has moments, no matter if it's your dream job, no matter how much your salary is or what that paycheck looks like. Work feels like work sometimes. And, that's certainly the case for me, but I try to always keep in perspective how fortunate I am to do something that I love. My job largely entails watching college basketball and watching college football. And if I ever complain about that, shame on me. Shame on me, for sure. So prior to CBS, I covered the Memphis Grizzlies as a beat writer for the newspaper in Memphis. And I got to that gig from a job covering University of Tennessee sports for the Chattanooga Times Free Press in Tennessee. So my path to where I am now with CBS Sports was very what I would call traditional. In the year 2025, there are a million different ways to get into the media industry. And the path I took was the same path that you could have taken in 1970. I started working for the student newspaper, working for the student radio station, doing internships for newspapers, freelancing Friday night football, high school football articles for a local paper. And just all the very traditional things that you might have done 50, 75 years ago to get into the newspaper industry. But obviously, the industry has evolved a ton. And a large part of what I do now is talking on podcasts or YouTube videos or radio shows. And they have us cutting up 30 to 90-second vertical videos to send to our social media team so that when we do an article, there can be a TikTok that goes with it on the CBS Sports social channels and things like that. So the one constant, I think, in probably every business is change, but that's probably even more so the case in the media business. So here I am in my early 30s trying to change and adapt and roll with the punches in a changing industry. And that's fun. There's rarely a dull moment, and there's always something new that they're wanting us to dabble in. So I appreciate that. It's at the end of the day, like, writing is still the core of what I do, but there is more to it now in this day and time.
Yeah, I'm like the changing landscape of your role, especially in the last 5 years. I feel like it's almost been exponential. Like you said, stuff's always changing, but just from going to writer to having to create video content, audio content, kind of like just you're a multimedia person in and of yourself, just beyond a writer, which was not the case even 10 or 15 years ago in this space, which is unique. You and I met through your wife. You have a great wife, beautiful daughter, and through Chick-fil-A, which is awesome. So you've gotten to see under the hood on that side of the business too. But it's a funny story of us meeting. I'd heard of you because you write for CBS, and I'm a huge college football fan. And, I'd never put out there that I have a college football podcast unless it's like fun fact or like something interesting about you. I don't know. A little bit of imposter syndrome of like, oh yeah, like I have a podcast, and it's like, well, it's not big. It's for fun. It's something we do. But someone else had shared with your wife that I had a college football podcast, and she was like, oh yeah, like my husband David does like college football stuff, and I was like, oh, like well, what do you do? And you're like, oh, I'm a writer. I'm like, oh, cool, like. For who? And you're like CBS. I'm like, oh, what was your name again? Which was funny and super grateful. We met. I guess this is over 4 years ago now. We've had a friendship, and yeah, super grateful for you, man. You've inspired me as a writer. We've shared some of our writing stuff that's not sports related, not even business related. As I've started to write stuff about my dad, and I thought you read a really sweet article about your dad as well. Anyway, man, super great to know you.
It definitely boosted my ego when we met and you had actually heard of me, because I had been at CBS for like a year at that point. And you were like, oh, you're David Cobb, and I was like, yeah, I am David Cobb.
That's right. I am David Cobb. Up? I've told you this, but I texted my buddy Daniel, who I do the college football podcast with. And I said, dude, I'm sitting across the table from David Cobb at dinner right now. And he was like, no way. So he that's two people who knew who you were based off the name. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is who I'm thinking about. And I was pulling up under the table on my phone, the CBS Sports app, and pulling up because this was in April. I was trying to find like last year's picks or like maybe I were doing spring football stuff, and very quickly found an article from you. I was like, this is exactly who I was thinking of, which is funny. Yeah, man, it's been great. I do have a question before we dive into kind of you and your work. And, I read a book called Master Your First Job. What was your first job?
So my first job was working at the gate of a youth baseball megaplex in the Memphis area. So Ken Fields, really nice park that no longer exists, but at the time it was, the premier destination in the Mid-South for travel ball.
Wow.
Talking 6 and under to really all the way up. They even had like a full-size college, size field. So you would have families coming in from all over the region, and I was the guy who sat at the entrance and took their money, told them that they couldn't bring their drinks in, which was always the worst.
That's great. They
a lot of that. Karens. This was actually before the term Karen had been coined.
They were there.
But Karen did not like being told that she could not bring in her Sonic cherry limeade to the baseball park.
Man.
But yeah, that was a great first job because it was related in some way, at least to sports, which has always it's always been a passion of mine. So I was like, well, if it's this or, I don't know, stocking shelves at Walmart, which is a totally fine first job, I was like, well, I'd rather do the thing that involves sports in some capacity.
Was this W-2 or are you getting paid cash?
No, this was like a real corporation.
Okay.
I think I was making, I started out making minimum wage, which I think was $7.25, $7.50.
It still is.
Yeah, it still is. Okay. That's what I made. I think my second year, so my first year was sophomore year of high school that summer after sophomore year, minimum wage. Year 2, I think I got like a 50-cent bump to like $7.75. Took on some concession roles as well, and then year 3, which was after I graduated high school, before I'd gone to college, I think they bumped me up to like $8.25 or something.
You were rolling in it, man.
Yeah. But it was a fun place to work. In high school, it taught me how to interact with bosses. It taught me how to communicate with others who I wouldn't have necessarily communicated with otherwise. And it was funny because, some of the people you work around, it's like a lot of high school kids, young people who work there like me. But then, there were also some characters who were really rough around the edges who just needed a job or maybe 2 or 3 jobs for various reasons. And, it's good to be exposed to different types of people and to have to share a space with them and learn how to work with them. And that is something that translates and carries on as you move into adulthood. So in that sense, it was a really good first job.
I love that. I remember getting my first raise, something similar to like $7.75, and being like, I have made it. I am making so much money now that I've gotten this raise, which is just fun.
I don't know about you, but I drove an F-150 in high school. And this is at a time when gas prices were really, more than they are now, and
like over $4 a gallon.
Roughly. And so, this was a 2000 F-150 that got like 16 miles a gallon.
Yeah.
And so I had to, half of my paycheck went to pay for gas.
To getting to work.
and the other half went to the McDonald's value menu when you could still get 2 McDoubles and a large fry for $4.36. Those were the good old days.
You could go to Taco Bell with a $10 bill and be a king. You could own that place with $10. David, I feel like with what I've always appreciated, especially with sports writers or sports journalists, is that you get to be a storyteller, and that these games and these events happen, and really kind of journalists and people in your field, they get to then tell the story of what happened for the test, for the test of time. It's ongoing. You have books about big games, you have articles you can go back and read, newspaper clippings. Even on the broadcast, the people doing the broadcast, it's like a lot of people associate big sports moments with the people who helped tell that story, right? With your role as a storyteller, what do you think is your role in storytelling? What role do you think storytelling has in a world that is increasingly driven with hot takes and short attention span? Like you mentioned the TikTok thing, even that you're having to do now with your articles.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say 90% of what I write is meant to feed the news cycle of the day, right? Overreactions from the first 4 weeks of the season, quarterback power rankings, the bottom 25. These are things that are really only going to live in the moment, and not live on forever or in any great way. But the other 10% of what I do is hopefully really good storytelling that does have an impact beyond just the moment. And there have been so many times over my career where I've been fortunate enough to tell sports stories and non-sports stories that have had an impact on a fairly large scale. And those are the stories that you really appreciate, love, that keep you going, that keep you coming back for more, that you're always keeping an eye out for. One that I still have from the Chattanooga Times-Free Press, my first job actually out of college was covering the outdoors for the Times-Free Press and like outdoor recreation. Chattanooga is a huge hiking, mountain biking, kayaking type of market with the mountains and the river and all that. And so I have clipped out and on our refrigerator here at the house a story that I wrote on a dad in Chattanooga. He's about 30 years old, diagnosed with brain cancer, and resolved to run the Chattanooga half marathon, and not just run it. He wanted to compete for the title. And he ended up finishing like top 10 in his age group. And then he had a 15-month prognosis. He ended up living for several years, running, painting, and genuinely inspiring a whole community, a whole city, and people well beyond that city as well. And so I wrote a lot of articles about him, just documenting his journey. And the thing that always stuck out to me was his faith, his perspective. And, when you get to do something like that, it's not just about the audience, it's about the impact it had on me. Like, I think writing about Nathan Sexton, this guy, helped me prepare for the challenges that were ahead in my life when I began to saw my dad go through a terminal diagnosis. Because I had seen Nathan walk through that with the faith and perspective that he did, it helped shape my perspective towards, what my father was going through. And so, I can see how the stories that I've covered and the situations that I've been in have shaped me as well. And so that's something that's pretty cool.
I think that's something that just in general, I think you hear sports writer in, I think the stereotypical, so you write articles for a bunch of guys who just, want to sit in a bar and watch sports and, just want to sit in front of a TV all day. To me, sports, well, number one, growing up, sports became one of life's best teachers, just like playing team sports and having to, you talked about the job thing, but like having to interact with other people and all try to work together to accomplish a task. I'm like, that's not going away for the rest of my life. And I get to learn that at a very young age playing. I mean, I played it all growing up. I played football, basketball, baseball. I mean, year round was playing something. But to me, like sports, even now, to me, the best moments and best stories are the ones because these are human beings like accomplishing something that they've dreamed of. I mean, as you know, I'm a big Georgia fan. I'm like watching us win in 21. Dude, Stetson crying on the sideline. I'm like, this kid has spent 6 years being doubted, by me included. I'll be happy to admit. I said famously after the Florida game, I said, Georgia needs JT Daniels healthy if they want to accomplish all their goals this season. That was what I said after the Florida game that year. Haven't deleted the tweet, left it up there. I'll own that.
Wait, you're a Georgia fan?
I am, yeah, just a little bit. And like watching a human that went through all that that like his whole life, his goal was in NFL. His goal is to be a Georgia quarterback. I mean, his name's Stetson Fleming Bennett the fourth. I mean, if that's not born to be a Georgia quarterback, I'm not sure what is. To watch that human go through that, or even Kirby, like went to Georgia, met his wife at Georgia, like to bring it back. I'm like, that's what makes those special to me. Or even, like the fact that, that was something my dad and I bonded over, right? Like you and I both lost our dad. So like in that moment, I'm tearing up thinking like, man, I wish my dad was here to experience this with me. It's like, it's connecting. So I think your role is unique in that you get to tell these stories that are not just, here's what the score was and, the offensive line played well and whatnot, but these stories that really are connecting to people because these people have a connection to these other people and these other humans and the sport that they love. And I think that's really special.
So the thing that shaped my perspective as much as anything, because like you growing up, I played sports year round. I was insufferably competitive. I mean, just to an unhealthy level, almost.
Yeah.
My Tennessee fandom was on that same level. But at night, I had a radio CD player thing in my bedroom, and it always stayed on the local sports radio station. Yeah. And at night, there was a syndicated program called Celebrating Life Through Sports. And it was hosted by a guy named David Stein, who actually had a very interesting religious conversion story. Anyway, long story short, he's a Christian guy who's doing this podcast to celebrate life through sports. And people would call in and be like, well, the Cowboys are so bad. And Troy Aikman's the worst quarterback. I don't even know who was the Cowboys quarterback in 2008. I'm not sure. I think Troy Aikman had retired.
Probably Romo.
Yeah, probably. And they would be doing the normal sports talk thing.
Yeah.
And he would say, well, hold on. Tell me about why the Cowboys mean so much to you. And
that's cool.
And then he'd have to redirect him a few times, but eventually they would get to a point where they would say, well, I grew up going to Cowboys games with my grandfather, and there was those long car rides to and from the stadium where he and I bonded. And when he passed a few years ago, he left me his signed Emmitt Smith jersey, and it's now hanging on the wall. And every time they win a game, I look at it and I think about how special my relationship was with my grandfather or something. And he would get that out of these callers. And that totally reshaped the way I thought about sports. I mean, I'm still competitive. I still care about what happens on the field.
Same.
But in the grand scheme of things, sports are a vehicle for human connection. And they're the universal language, the language that can transcend, what you hear, audibly. I could go to France right now and have a good time with somebody who speaks French watching a basketball game or a soccer game or whatever, and
that's so right.
That totally started to reshape and frame my perspective, because that's been the story of my life. I mean, my closest friends in life are friends who I've known and met and deepened bonds with through sports. My profession is obviously sports. I think about my relationship with my grandfather, who still plays golf at age 90. That relationship was built through playing golf, and that's a special relationship. And so that's why sports are important to me, is the stage and the platform that they've brought for me to form connections and, find meaning in what some people might see as trivial moments of athletic competition. There are deeper meanings interwoven throughout all of that. So yeah, shout out to Celebrating Life Through Sports by David Stein. No longer on the air. He's actually a pastor now, but if you could ever, go find some of his sermons. It's really an incredible story of how he kind of reached that point in his life where he was hosting that show, and it had a huge impact on me.
That's really cool. I wish I could have listened to David Stein in that show. That sounds like a great podcast idea. You should start back up. Because I'm like, so my dad passed away in November 2019. My boss at the time, big LSU fan. We had talked all year about if we both make it to the SEC championship, we should go. He called me week of, and he's like, hey, how you doing? Hey, when you get back in town, just so you know, I've already bought us tickets and flights. We're going to go to Atlanta and watch Georgia and LSU play. And I was like, oh, it's sick. And I remember Georgia, we were sitting in the end zone. Georgia came out of the tunnel in front of us. And oh, dude, I just lost it. I'm like, this is a football game. I'm not crying because I love Georgia, but I'm like, not that much. I'm like, this is a bunch of 18 and 22-year-olds running out on the field. Play hasn't even happened yet. And wasn't going to go good that night. But yeah, I'm just the connection that I had of I immediately thought of my dad. I was for the first time since he had passed, it was for this first huge wave of grief. Mm-hmm. And I'm but it's because of this connection we had through sport. And I think that's special. And I think whatever the avenue is I think it's cool that as humans, we have different activities. And in this case, it's football and college football that we love, that we can bond with people over. And that I'm introverted and I can go to a stadium full of 93,000 people and I'm high-fiving and hugging strangers whenever, a 19-year-old crosses a white line on a football field. And at the end of the day, that sounds silly, but I love sports, like you said, because of the genuine connections that we have with other people and the memories it brings. I think it's still one of life's best teachers. And like you said, I like that you said the universal language we can all speak.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what makes it special. And it's still ongoing because I think about it now. We're both parents now. We're going to get to share those same things with our kids, and so that's something that's cool to think about, is us being able to forge those same connections that help build us into who we are.
I had someone ask, they were like, what if, my daughter Jamie, like, what if Jamie becomes a Florida fan? I'm like, that's fine. But I just don't see it happening, because as a kid, what do you want to do? You want to do whatever dad's doing, whatever mom's doing. Like that's what's cool when you're young. I'm like, so those forging memories, I'm like, I just don't, I'm excited she's already asked, she can go to a game this year. She's like, I want to go. And I'm like, okay, well, we play Charlotte in November. We can't go before then because, I'm a fan. I'm not trying, I love my daughter. I want to be able to watch these SEC games.
Right. The first game I went to was a Tennessee UAB game. I was 6. Exactly. That was the perfect game to take me to.
Right. That's right. But she knows now some of the fight songs. Just from she hear Georgia plays DSC right on third down. They call it choker. It's just no words, just the sound they play on third down. And she calls that song Georgia, like want to play Georgia. And it's just like our third down band thing, which is cool. Okay, with you as a writer, something I've talked about a lot with other business owners and business leaders on this podcast is AI and the AI revolution. It's almost nauseating how much it's been talked about, but it's also a technology that's here to stay and is going to have an impact, already having an impact on jobs. How have you seen AI impact your role personally, especially as a writer? And do you see AI impacting your role in the future?
Yeah, so I've used it kind of more for like trivial purposes at this point. For example, we did a college basketball story a few weeks back where a bunch of our writers picked hypothetical outdoor venues where they would want to see games played. And it was just sort of this, it's the off season. This could be a fun, engaging story. So I had AI create images that depicted the choices. So mine was Army versus Navy on the White House lawn. And so I had AI.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I had AI do that. So it made for a cool little thumbnail for me to put on social with the story. The other thing that it helped me with was I was going through for an article before the season on most overrated football programs of the past decade. And I needed to comb through and get the final team recruiting rankings for every team that I was looking at over that 10-year period. That would have been a very exhaustive task to undergo manually with the way the 24/7 Sports website works. So I had Gemini complete that task for me. And I went back and checked, not every single year, but I checked about a third of the entries to make sure it was pulling the right data. And then once I saw that it had correctly pulled the first 30 that I was looking for, I was like, okay, it understands what I'm looking for. But that's the huge part of it, is if you're going to rely on it, you're responsible for verifying that it's spitting out correct information. And when you're in the information business and my work's going to be read by thousands, tens of thousands of people, my name's on it. I got to make sure this stuff is right. And I can't imagine getting to a place where AI is actually going to be doing the writing for me. That I don't think really is ever going to be practical, because AI is going to continue to improve and whatever, but there's still a uniqueness to the human voice and a layer of soul, creative soul, that AI will never be able to replicate. Watch, maybe in 10 years I'm on the breadline and because of AI, I don't know. But I try not to worry about it. I try to use it where it can be helpful, but I try not to become consumed by worry and fear over what it can do. Here's one way that it's really changing our industry, though. For a long time, not just for us, but for a lot of content publishers, search engine optimization was the primary mechanism through which you would draw in readers.
Yeah.
People would Google search. You would have your headline and your story kind of tailored to land on the first page of Google search results. If somebody Googled college football scores, for example, Well, now AI is giving them the scores and the information and preempting their need to even click on an article. So that's had an impact on our traffic patterns. It's had an impact on our numbers, and it's made us rethink our strategy, not just us, but publishers, online publishers all over the world. All right, if we're not going to be getting the search traffic at such a high level anymore, what other avenues can we pursue to recoup that traffic? Because obviously traffic is advertising dollars keeps us employed, right? So that's how it's changing us the most in real time. It's not so much my writing process as it is the business model as a whole that's undergoing a shift as AI is able to answer more questions without necessarily directing you to a website.
Yeah, it's interesting. A marketing friend of mine has talked about how AIO is going to be the new SEO of like, I mean, I think the perfect example of this is, recipes online. The reason that you have to skip through, 10 scrolls of crap to jump to the recipe is because of SEO. It's because of this, like, oh, if I, well, my grandma first taught me this bread recipe. I'm like, I don't care how much flour do I need? Like, jump the recipe. But it's the reason all that exists is because of SEO.
You don't like to celebrate life through cooking? Is that what I'm hearing?
That's right. It's like, I mean, here a good sports example would be like, hey, how many passing yards did Ty Simpson have on Saturday? And it's like, well, if you're writing a whole article, it's like, well, that's not what I need right this second. I just need how many passing yards. And AI is going to be really good at that. Of just like, how many passing yards? 28, whatever. It's just like, boom, got it. And this is just me being curious and asking. I'm curious if, writers like you, like the value is going to be not just like, here's what happened, because I think AI is going to be good to pull that information of like, here's what happened in the game, kind of from a, this play happened. But opinions, I think like y'all's opinion pieces, I mean, especially college football, like I think a feature and not a bug is, I mean, rankings are a great example. People love rankings. People want to know who David's top 10 teams are because they want to see if theirs lines up so they can yell at you whenever they disagree and retweet you and say David's a genius whenever they agree with you. And that's been a feature of college football for a long time. The people who say they hate preseason rankings, I'm like, no, you don't. We all love talking about it.
Yep.
Like, that's a feature. And also I go back to like the longer form. Can you tell the stories of the humans in the game? Because I do think AI is going to take some of that, like, hey, I'm gonna get to the information I need as far as, and even like the Google summary stuff of, hey, what were the first downs 18-13 of the game? That's, you don't need a human to tell you that story. I think you need humans to tell stories, right? Like, I am not interested in reading an AI summary of like someone's life. I want someone who went and interviewed the kid and went to the parents' house and the high school he played at and like put together these pieces in the story. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So those are my favorite stories to do. Like,
yeah,
for example, because of Chick-fil-A, we were traveling for 3 years, and I just so happened to be in New Jersey in January of, 2023? Yeah, 23. And so I noticed Fairleigh Dickinson was having a good season. So I went up and wrote an article all about this tiny, undersized team that won 4 games last year that looks like they might make the NCAA tournament. And then 2 months later, when they pulled one of the most shocking upsets in the history of college basketball and beat number 1 seed Purdue, like we bumped that story, put it back on the homepage, and it was here's how the tiniest team in college basketball took down 7'4" Zach Edey, and it wasn't because they shot 37% from 3-point range. It was the story of how the coach got there, how he got these players, why their style of play works, and the human elements of what they had accomplished. And that's something that AI will not be able to replicate. I think that the thing with AI isn't really all that different than it's been from a sports standpoint, because for the last 10, 15 years, you've been able to pull up the box score on your ESPN or CBS Sports app. So we got it, 25 years ago, a lot of people learned that information from opening their newspaper on Sunday morning. Like, that would have been the first,
crazy.
That would have been the first time they saw a box score in the year 2000, most likely, was by, in your neck of the woods, opening up the AJC and being like, oh, wow, David Green threw for DJ Shockley threw for 237 yards. Okay. So it's less about that, the nuts and bolts of the game, although you'll still find that on our website for the biggest games, but it's more about the perspective the opinion and then the human thread. And then the other thing is new information and breaking news. I mean, that's not necessarily what I do. Like, I'm not out here like Pete Thamel on Saturday morning tweeting out injury updates, but we do have a couple of writers on our team who are pretty plugged in on the national scene, who people will direct information their way, like Matt Zenitz or like a Brandon Marcello. Like, they will break news. AI will never be able to break news, I don't think. So, there's certainly value in that as well.
And you and I have talked about that even when you were a beat writer at Tennessee. There's at least one example of you get to know these coaches, because at the end of the day, you all have a job to do. And the coaches are going to need something from David at some point, and you're going to want something from the coaches at some point. So you trade information, right? And that's something that, again, that comes from relationships and not just information that's available. I just never see a world where some assistant coach is just telling AI what's going on so it can get out. You know what I mean? I just don't see that happening. That comes from those relationships.
Yeah, without a doubt. And that is something you can't really fake. There is a genuineness to that, though it sounds transactional. Like, you still have to be able to connect on a human to human level with the people that you cover, because that's how you build trust. Like, if they don't trust you, they're not going to want to work with you. Right. So that's a huge part of it. When I was covering Tennessee, for example, I came across some information that I'll just speak in general terms, that like maybe the regime didn't want publicized. Right. And so I took it to their communications liaison and I was like, well, hey, look, I've got this piece of information. It's sort of in the realm of what I do as a reporter, is to get stuff like this out. Is there anything I need to know or any reason why I shouldn't? And we were able to sort of work something out to where, all right, I kind of sat on that information. It wasn't going to change the world. And in exchange, they gave me exclusive access to an interview with a new staff hire that Tennessee had made, which honestly, my readers cared way more about getting to know the new coach, the new staffer, than they did about whatever relatively trivial legal entanglement that somebody had fallen into. Right. Well, so you do have to navigate things like that. But at the same time, and what I do, like, if we had been talking about the offensive coordinator being arrested for aggravated assault, like we have to write that. Like, we can't let that go. Like, there's certain things that rise to a certain level that, like, you would be, I think, implicit in a cover up if you didn't get that out there.
Right.
So those are discussions you have to have with your editor and with your leadership at your organization. All right, what do you have? How important is this to the general public and to our readership? Is there a way that you could leverage this to maybe get something else out there that our readers would care about more? And if so, that's a good alternative. So yeah, those are always interesting discussions and debates. And those debates people don't realize, like, there are still moment by moment decisions being made by newsroom leadership. And that's like, our news and media are in more turmoil now than they ever have been. And everybody's got an opinion on the news media, and I don't speak for the news media as a enterprise. Like, that's not what I'm not sticking up for the hyper partisan, cable news or anything. I don't care about all that. But, in our newsroom at CBS Sports and in your local newsrooms around the country, like, there are daily, hourly decisions being made about how to handle certain topics that I think it would benefit the public if there was a greater understanding of all that. But anyway, I think that's probably a conversation for another day.
Well, something you and I both share a passion in is investing in young people. One of the main reasons I wrote my book was for that, just to help someone else in their journey that's behind me, just do a better job than I did and learn lessons at a younger age than I did. You serve on the alumni board for the University of Tennessee's journalism school. You spoke there this morning. Why is that something that's important to you and that you still make time for?
Well, I think to a certain level, it's because I didn't necessarily have like a great mentor or example. Yeah. Especially early in college. I felt like I was kind of blazing my own trail a little bit. Yeah. In that there weren't a ton of examples that I had encountered of people at that time coming through the UT journalism program and then finding jobs as sports writers. Right. In fact, I remember it was the end of my sophomore year. A friend of mine who I worked with at the student newspaper was graduating, and he got a job at some small paper in Michigan on their sports staff. And I was like, whoa, that's awesome. This was like, not some prestigious job, but it was like a friend of mine who was doing what I wanted to do, getting a job. And I was like, that was really impactful for me to see that, because it was like, okay, this can be done. And that was sort of the wind in my sails that I needed to keep carrying on. And so, now that I have kind of been in this profession, I think I know I can be helpful to some of these aspiring sports writers, and I feel like it's my obligation to help them in any way I can. And that goes for whether or not they're at the University of Tennessee, because if they have the courage to reach out and ask for help or to introduce themselves at a game or at an event, like, that's, to me, that's impressive. And it's a sign that, they're really serious about making it in the industry. I love to help people who are willing to seek help. I think that's a huge part of getting into any industry or any business is seeking out advice and help from others. And when people are willing to do that, I want to.
That's huge. That's something I've also found is that most people are willing to give you 5 minutes if you're intentional about it and don't waste their time. I thought it was just a Chick-fil-A thing because I felt like I was in this unique umbrella, and Chick-fil-A is great about this of like, oh, I can reach out to like this person who's an SVP and they'll go get a coffee with me at the office. Like that's really cool. That and I was encouraged to do that. I was like, oh yeah, if you think someone's cool or you look up to someone or think their job's interesting, just send them an email and ask for 15 minutes of their time and tell them what you want to talk about. And I took that as we were growing our college football podcast and just started like, I'm just going to DM people on Twitter and just see if they'd ever come on and talk ball. And I'm like, we got Josh Payne on early before he blew up. Martin Simmons came on. Now the GM of Vanderbilt football. Go Doors. We had on Kelly Ford. He's a stats guy. Parker Fleming, stats guy. I've met so many people through the college football industry that I'm like, I was surprised would even respond just by me being like, hey, I'm really interested in you and like your work. Would love to interview you or, take some of your time. In fact, I reached out to, did you ever meet Matthew Coca?
He was the producer for Cover 3 for a while, wasn't he?
Yeah. So yeah. So again, small thing, probably could have YouTubed this, but I liked the way their setup was on YouTube with like their different boxes and stuff. And I just DM'd him and I was like, hey, so I know you're the producer for Cover 3. How do you set this up for like your YouTube video stuff? Dude, he went with me for an hour and walked through his like Premiere settings and everything to like produce the podcast. I was like, that was really nice and didn't have to do that. I think that's a good just life advice, especially for young people listening of just like, hey, you never know who's going to say yes until you ask. Just be specific and go ask for help. I think there's a lot of good people in the world that are willing to help you on your journey.
Yeah. And if somebody turns you down, that's on them. That's them being a jerk.
That's right. I completely agree.
So yeah, I enjoy helping other people, especially aspiring sports writers when possible, because like I said, I didn't necessarily have like the template there in front of me.
Yeah.
But if I can help provide that for aspiring sports writers, then I'm more than happy to do it.
So I have one more kind of business leadership question, and I have some rapid fire college football questions. You've had, I'm sure we all have had good and bad bosses. Like your role is unique in that a lot of the work you do, I'm sure, you're told what to write about. You're assigned to games, but I don't know, you have some journalistic freedom of kind of, what to write about. How can people that are in these leadership roles, whether it's in sports media or businesses, create an environment to bring out like the best in other people?
Yeah, for me, it's all about getting to know the person who you manage and understanding what motivates them, what gets under their skin, what's the best way to get the best out of them. And I don't think there is a one size fits all approach when it comes to extracting the best from your team. I think you have to be willing and able to get to know people individually. And so that's when I've had good bosses, that's what they've done. They've gotten to know me individually, and that fosters respect. So if I respect them and then they have a huge assignment or a difficult task or something that seems trivial and unexciting that they need me to do. That's what it is more often than anything. It's just, this is a trivial assignment that's just going to be a brain drain that's going to take you a couple hours that I know you don't want to do, but I'm going to ask you to do it anyway. And my response to that ask is going to be dictated by the level of respect that I have for that person.
Absolutely.
And if they've taken the time to get to know me and I know they're in my corner, I'll do that. And then I'll do it 10 times over because it's you who's asking me and I believe in you. And you're somebody who I know has my back, who actually knows me. But there have been other times where there have been bosses, editors, supervisors who don't know anything about you and will berate you and who will come after you, who will try to put you down. And that makes for a miserable place to work. It makes for a horrible place to work. And it makes you want to leave and go work somewhere else. And that's happened, right? I think a lot of us have probably experienced something like that at some point in our lives. And I absolutely have. But the good thing is when you go through that and then you get to a place where you're working for people who value you, who respect you, who care about you as more than just a part of an assembly line, it makes you appreciate them. It makes you appreciate where you're at. And then it also makes you realize, if I get to a point one day where I'm a manager of people, that's what I want to be like, And so I just think, there's a lot of kind of one size fits all approaches out there about how to manage and how to lead. And yeah, there are general guiding principles that I think are universally applicable. But at the end of the day, every business is a people business and people are different and you have to get to know them on an individual level. And if you don't have the bandwidth or the ability to do that, you need to have an organizational structure or a leadership structure to where the people below you can foster those sorts of relationships with, with the grunt level employees. And so, that's something that I've certainly learned over my decades since graduating college.
And you're passionate about. Yeah, I had a boss tell me, take care of people and they'll take care of the business. And it has fundamentally shaped the way that I look at how I lead other people at the time and even now, and how I help others lead people as well. And that if you take care of individuals, and every individual is different. Same boss also told me, hey, Jacob, they're not computers. You have to lead each one individually. You can't just input and get an output. And I was like, okay, you're right. But yeah, take care of people to take care of the business. And I've told people, like, you don't work for a logo. People don't ever work for a logo. They work for a person. And as much as I love Chick-fil-A, still love Chick-fil-A, I'm like, I'm sure it's cool that you're working for a legacy brand at CBS and that you have the I logo next to your name. If your boss sucked, you try to go find work somewhere else. Like the logo only means so much. And I fell in love with Chick-fil-A because of, Jeremy and Karina and Evan and Joshua and Jennifer, like these amazing leaders I had, like back to back to back, that kept me there a long time. This is the reason I love Chick-fil-A. And the C logo is great. The company's amazing, but it was the individuals that actually made the experience worth staying and to your point, working hard for, right? Of like, I'm happy to do the grunt work because I know you've got my back. And yeah, and from what you said, sounds like same exact thing of just, you work for a person, not for a logo. And as cool as CBS is, it's the bosses that make the experience worthwhile and worth staying for.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to my boss, Marcus Nelson. He's my guy. He could ask me to rank all 363 mascots in Division I, and I'd say, yes, sir.
I'll help you out. Hey, some rapid fire college football questions, because I'm a super fan, and if there's a few super fans listening, they'll appreciate this. Craziest story you can publicly share from your time, either as a national or local beat writer in college football?
Well, it had to be Schiano Sunday in 2017. Yeah. I was on the Tennessee beat when they tried to hire Greg Schiano to replace Butch Jones, and it didn't go very well. There was a fan revolt, but there was this moment in time where it was like, oh no, did Tennessee sign this memorandum of understanding? Did they get so far down the rabbit hole from a contractual standpoint that they're now legally obligated either to make him their football coach or to pay him a buyout?
Pay him.
And probably the biggest story I've ever broken was that no, the chancellor had not signed or executed the MOU. So I actually
broke that story.
Yeah, I beat Chris Lowe on it.
That's the first time I've heard that from you. We've talked about Schiano Sunday, never that part.
Yeah, that was by far the craziest experience that I had, especially as a beat writer, because I was also getting married in, like,
I was gonna say
10 days.
That part.
I was getting married in 10 days. I was trying to cover basketball and women's basketball too. And then we had this coaching search that was just unhinged. And so that was kind of my claim to fame on the Tennessee beat, was being the one who broke the story that no, Tennessee's administration had stopped short of executing that MOU, which was a huge deal, because if the chancellor had signed that thing, they would have ended up owing Greg Schiano a lot more money. They still ended up having to settle with him in court, but yeah, that was wild. Schiano Sunday, all the fallout from that. It took months to unravel all of it in a treasure trove of emails from a public records request that really shed a lot of light on that. That was that was something I will absolutely never forget. Yeah.
Okay, best college football game you've seen in person.
You're going to like this one. It was probably Georgia over Tennessee in 2013.
Dude, Pig Howard.
Pig Howard fumbles through the end zone while reaching for the pylon. Yeah.
That was awful uniforms.
Yeah. That was, I don't think I've ever seen a crowd more devastated. Well, honestly, probably week 3 of this year, probably.
We just came off of one.
Yeah, but that Tennessee-Georgia game in 2013, I was there covering that one as a student, and that one was a banger of a game and a total heartbreaker for Tennessee.
I forget why, but we didn't have running backs that game, and I think Murray had a 67-yard touchdown run or something. It was just he had to do it all that game. Yeah, what a game. There you go, in person. Best college football game you've watched on TV. You've been covering the sport for a while.
Yeah, that's tough. What's your answer to that one?
I'm going to be a little bit biased. I'll say one that I'll say 3 Georgia games because I'm thinking of other games. Georgia, Ohio State in 22 in the Peach Bowl was unbelievable. Georgia, Oklahoma in the Rose Bowl was unbelievable. Georgia, Alabama in the 17 championship. I mean, the fact that you went to overtime in a national championship, that hasn't happened in so long.
Yeah, okay.
The 16 Bama Clemson championship, Deshaun to Hunter Renfrow to end the game was a great game.
I think for me, it's either Tua leading Alabama to the national title after entering at halftime. Sorry, or it's if you picked a bunch of Georgia games, I'll pick a Tennessee game. Tennessee over Alabama in 2022 because that was
16.
Yeah, that was the breakthrough moment for Tennessee under Josh Heupel, and then that field goal gets tipped, and then it barely flutters through. The whole stadium rushes the field.
Yep.
I don't know, man. That one's pretty hard to top.
That is hard to top. Okay. Best team you've gotten to see in person.
Yeah. I covered, it's funny. So Georgia's second national title team under Kirby, didn't they lose to Alabama in the SEC championship game?
That was the first one.
Okay. So it was the first one. So that was 21, right?
Yeah.
So that's the best team that I've covered one of their games, but they lost the game that I covered. Because I was at that SEC championship game. That defense obviously was, one of the best of all time. For whatever
I don't think we're going to see another one like it ever again.
That's odd to me. I saw their one-off game. So, but yeah, that is the best team that I've ever covered in person. I mean, they were absolutely elite, and they were they ushered in a different era because prior to that, it had been Mac Jones throwing for 4,500 yards. It had been Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase putting up 600 yards a game. But the way that Georgia team played really kind of changed college football.
My answer would be the 19 LSU team, so I'll be unbiased there. That SEC championship game, I remember watching Joe Burrow, we had rushed only 4, gotten to him. He shed one tackler, escaped to the right, is running to the sideline. I think he's going out of bounds. He throws across his body 75 yards to hit Jamar Chase for a touchdown. And I'm like, you just can't do anything to that. I'm like, you can't, there's nothing you can do to beat that. Okay, loudest stadium you've covered a game in.
So Tennessee, Oklahoma, 2015. Neyland was pretty electric. Now I've been to 13 of the 16 SEC stadiums. So I've experienced most of them. It's either Neyland at peak volume or it's Bryant Denny at peak. I mean, Bryant Denny is, it gets a bad rap because Saban used to get on the fans for leaving at halftime when they'd be blowing teams out and all that. But when they're there and engaged in a game that they care about, it's elite. Now I will say I've never been to LSU. You always hear good things about LSU at night, but
we got to go. Me and you.
I would love.
I've never been either.
Yeah, I would love to go and get the full Baton Rouge experience.
I love it. David, where can people read your articles about college football and college basketball, connect with you? Where can people find David Cobb of CBS Sports?
Yeah, cbssports.com is the easiest place to find my work. If you go to the college football or college basketball pages, you'll at some point be finding my work. And I'm on Twitter X at David Cobb. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter, find me on cbssports.com and LinkedIn. If you have a reason to connect, hit me up. Yeah, love to make connections.
Love it. David, thank you so much for being on the Waves Business Coaching Podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you all so much for watching and listening to this episode of Waves Business Coaching. Take care.